Hi, and welcome to today's SFP webinar on PoE, Power over Ethernet, a digital extension of architectural and engineering evolution. This is Luis Garazzi, SFP's Director of Professional Development, and I'll be moderating today's webinar. Before we get started, I'm going to go over some information in regard to the webinar logistics. First, all participants will receive a certificate of attendance for one PDH. To receive a certificate, you must stay online for the entire duration of today's webinar. Certificates will be sent out via email within the next week. Also, we do not provide copies of the speaker's PowerPoint presentation. However, we will be posting a video of this presentation on SFP's YouTube channel and website in the next week. Additionally, you can ask our speaker questions by writing it in the webinar dashboard. You may ask a question at any time. However, we will not be taking any questions until the end of the webinar. Today's speaker is Ernesto Vega. Ernesto works at IEEE Standards Association as their Senior Manager of Opportunities Development. He leads the product development of all related products, such as handbooks, educational programs, mobile apps, and more. He is an electrical engineer and was recently recognized as the 2017 Fire Protection Engineer of the Year by the Society of Fire Protection Engineers, New Jersey chapter, and awarded the 2011 Tyco Patent Prize as the author of a patent application on visual fire alarm notification devices. So, with that being said, welcome, Ernesto.
Thank you, Luis. Thank you for having me here. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time to go to these presentations. Hopefully, this will help to bring this information to you guys, and also feel free to send us your questions, and any feedback is greatly appreciated. Basically, this is our attempt to start discussing this topic about power over Ethernet, specifically for the use in firearm systems, and then see how can we implement some of these technologies that have been used in other fields, bring that expertise to our fire alarm businesses. See if I can go to my next slide. We did. Okay. General disclaimer here that this presentation doesn't represent our employers or previous employers, especially since I work for IEEE, who developed some of the standards that we're going to discuss here, and also NFPA, where I did work before. So I'm just going to give you a general overview on my perspective as an engineer. How can we use, or can this be used for our systems? So just don't take this as the professional view or the official view of these employers. These are the general objectives here that we put the goals here in order to get your CEUs as well. So this is more as a general information for getting you credit for this educational program. Well, what can you expect from this presentation? We're going to do a brief introduction about the PoE industries or related standards, their benefits, how can be done, main codes and requirements, and how the main fire alarm and signaling code, the NFPA 72, is addressing this new technology or this emerging technology into firearm systems. As in many of my presentations, there will be many case scenarios where I'm going to display you maybe a layout or a description on how these code content or regulations or recommendations can be translated from the documents to a real scenario, out there for designing or for implementation. As Louis mentioned, this is my overall background here. I'm also a mathematician. I like math, and I do write books for kids. And I just mentioned this because some of the concepts that we see a lot to fire alarm design involves a lot of math. If you have those good fundamentals, you're going to do great doing some of the calculations that may need to be done. Keep an eye on that, because that's going to be your basics for developing good battery calculations and designing your fire alarm system. I also teach some of the standards that we're going to see here, and I do a lot of the outreach programs for IEEE related to our standards recommendations worldwide. Well, as a general introduction, this is one of the main IEEE standards in related to PoE. This is the 802.3bt. It was recently launched in 2018. And there is a link here in the middle of the screen. For all the standards that I'm going to be mentioning here, I'm going to provide you the links where you can get access to them. Especially for the IEEE, the 802 standards are free after 6 months after publication, their original publication. We do this through a program called GET program. So we get free access to these standards once they're released. So if you cannot wait the 6 months period, then you pay for the document. But if not, the links are here, and we have a main library. I'm going to show you how to get there, so you get access to those standards. For some other standards that we're going to mention here, there should be a free read-only version, especially for the NFPA standards. I'm going to also show you if we can here, or if not, we put you in the comments somewhere how to get access to those standards if you need to do a quick research or a quick comments back to the standard that you are working on. So for the main 802s, I'm going to give you the links here. This one was launched in 2018. It has some regulations for the type of power, the amount of power that you're going to be using, and this is close to what we're going to be seeing in the firearm industry. So that's why I do recommend to go and take a look at this one. One of the main important aspects on this one is that it was developed mainly for non-fire protection engineers. We are not getting involved into this much yet, but hopefully we will. And I'm going to show you a few other standards where I think we as fire protection engineers or electrical engineers working in this field should be looking at. The 802s are big standards. IEEE is now celebrating 40 years since we started doing Ethernet, and we do regulate most of the aspects on the Ethernet. Also, the Wi-Fi also was developed here at IEEE. So it could be big and convoluted. So I'm going to guide you to like 4 or 5 that I think we mentioned like about six standards here. So, and there are active working groups where you can participate and get feedback from that. There's also free access to those. So you don't even have to be a member to get access to those standards. So this is the main one a couple of years ago. It's getting closer and closer to the uses that we're going to see in firearm systems, the type of wiring that is out there, the type of backups that is out there, that is kind of like related to our firearm or our main firearm codes and specs. So we're going to try to combine those aspects. I don't know if the video is showing my hands well, but anyway, we're going to try to see the technologies coming from the PoE industry and how they kind of marry to the NFPA standards. Well, what are the benefits of this PoE? And yes, I call it here a disruptive technology. For us, as a fire protection industry, we are not very familiar with power over Ethernet. And I'm going to show you some of the benefits here. And it's like you don't need additional AC power. The existing cabling, the Cat5, 5E, and 6 are already out there in the facilities. Or most facilities have the Ethernet connections, or when you have a university campus or a correctional facility also, where all this existing infrastructure is there, and therefore, how can we use it? This is another one of the standards, the 802.3CN. This one was launched in 2019. And here you can see our new branding scheme. It looks more modern. The IEEE SA did a rebranding recently, so it looks a little bit more modern, but we're still very busy and occupied with our standards. It's kind of complicated, but we try to make it as less complicated as possible. One of the advancements on this standard is the safe power devices. Like these are more our legacy devices. So these new regulations, we kind of request that the new technologies also are compatible with some of the legacy devices, which we do a lot in the firearm industry because our systems are installed and they work for 20, 25 years, maybe more. So during those years, we have new regulations, and we have the manufacturers are also developing new devices, and we try to keep that compatible with the previous generations of devices. So this is one of the good guidances here. These are non-PoE devices, but they are not firearm related. So they are doing that for the general use. But the good thing is, like, the language is there. So when we get to the implement firearm devices there, their background information is already in the standards. And I'm going to show you the similar aspect coming from the NFPA standards as well. So stay put. So these are the two main standards that we're going to be probably talking about: the PoE related to firearm systems, because there are many other ones here related depending on how much power do they draw, these devices draw. And you have type 2 or type 3 here, depending on the amount of power. I didn't went up to the 60 watts. I didn't went over that, but I'm going to show you a table later where all the other standards are. So if you have a firearm panel that draws more than that, then you will have a reference to where to go for the specific standards. I think that someone asked me before when we were planning this, how much power do our firearm system draw? And it depends, though. It depends on the field devices. And I just did a Google search before this webinar. And I have a data sheet somewhere in my screen I will show you later. So you can kind of estimate how much power do your devices draw. In general terms, the biggest ones will be like the amplifiers when you have audio. They used to be 100 watts. Now most manufacturers are doing 50 watt amplifiers. The NAC panels, I think they are up to 8, 12, maybe. And then for the main addressable devices, they don't draw much power, and that's one of the data sheets that we may look at later, or we add the link to this presentation. Or if not, just Google it. That's what I just did. I just did fire alarm, smoke detector data sheet, and you get a few manufacturers there. And then you can see how much your manufacturer or manufacturers that you use, how much power do they consume. Here on the bottom of the screen, you can also see the link to our IEEE library, which is called Explore, where we have, like, I don't know, 5 million documents. You can Google there. You can search more in details about the 802 standards and the link to the 802 standards as well. So there's different technologies here, and how they're working to use power over Ethernet. I think as a fire protection industry, we're a little bit behind, but sometimes that's better, though, because now we're going to have a refined set of standards from the 802s. We can also put our input into their process developing the standard developing process, so we can tell them, hey, this is what we use here in firearm systems, or how much is the backup for it. So that's how we can work together to make both systems, both standards, the 802s and the I'm going to say the NFPA standards, but it's more than that. It could be the building code or the fire code from IBC, for example. I just want to be as open and generic as possible. Here we're going to try to not to mention manufacturers per se or XYZ technologies, but more like a broader aspect to it. So this is not a sales pitch; it's more a technical presentation on what the implications are, where the requirements can be found, and how can you participate as well, getting these standards to be better and to work together better. Especially now that I think the PoE is going to be a reality soon, and we're going to see that we are already using some of that in the firearm industry. So how can it be done? How can we implement PoE in our firearm industry? Well, there is a few elements already there. This is a reference from NFPA 72, which is the main fire alarm and signaling code that we use. I referenced this one for the 2016 edition. The 2019, it's out there already, but the references will not change sections, meaning where the screen says now that this figure is a representation. This is not the exact image that is shown in the standard. This is my personal description or representation on how to implement it. In the standard, it's going to be in this figure. It's in the Appendix A, and you can see the reference there. And this is what is called Class N pathway, which is already there in the NFPA 72. This is so it's already there in our. We can use it now, and this is kind of powered over Ethernet, but we are only using it for communications at this time. But I think this is a good approach where the file arm code is already allocating these permissions to use PoE, and the class N will be the one. The description of class N has been refined a few times already, but it's good. It means that the working groups developing these standards are going from one point and building on and moving forward and creating a better infrastructure or design intent for our applications. This one in particular, I haven't seen it in the field yet. I don't think we are ready to do the field devices directly to the Ethernet boards, but it's allowed now by NFPA 72. So we're going to see other examples where I can tell you we did this and we did that. This one in particular, I haven't done it yet, or I haven't seen it in the field where the physical devices are connected directly to the switchboard. And I'm going to show you, I think, why, and some of the UL requirements that are going through now. We're going to see some of those references as well. Just want to be careful with my time. Okay, we have enough time. Okay, next. This is another example on this. I think is the main goal from the aggregators or from the building managers, also from the customer side and from the vendors, where both want to deal with one entity, doing security controls, fire safety, building management, energy management, heating and cold, all that stuff could then later be integrated into one. This is just one example of one of the manufacturers. I think all of them are looking into these similar aspects. And I think PoE is going to also help on this one, because you're going to have the same power references, the same security references, and not only security about access control and all that, but the IT security, so we don't get hacked or this information gets out there unexpectedly or with bad intentions. So I think everybody's going to try to combine all this. I think some of the companies are already making the efforts, and I think PoE also helps, and also with some of the opening standards that BACnet, we used it back then when, and now it's coming back because multiple industries are working still communicating through BACnet, and it's going to continue to evolve as well. So I'm just giving you an overall example of that. So what are the main codes requirements and recommendations for PoE? Okay, so for existing technologies, there is a lot of installations out there already using the RS-232. And that's good because we can use that one. It's being used for networks and security. Can we add fire? My general answer will be it depends. Mainly, it will depend on the authority having jurisdiction. If they allow you to mix security, Ethernet, maybe even Wi-Fi, if you have wireless devices. If the authority having jurisdiction allows you to combine that into the existing network, that's your main toll gate at this time. But the functionality is there, the installations are there, some equipment are there, and I think the cross listings will happen soon. And we have a slide for the UL requirements coming up. So I will show you where we are, some of these aspects. For the PoE, the 802s is the way to go for most applications under 100 watts. But my only personal concern is that these standards are not being led by firearm experts or industries. Now, so we need to start participating kind of into this developing these standards, because if we don't provide our input, they will continue to develop integration for many other devices. Even medical devices are now connected to Ethernet. So illumination engineers are there, building management are all connected to these. So I haven't seen it from the firearm industry yet, but hopefully this presentation will help also with that. Also the safe power technology, just every time that they say safe power, is just trying to aim to protect the legacy devices too. So that's also something that is very in alliance to what we have done in the past in fire protection engineering. So try to maintain the legacy devices while we do transition to this new era of, in this case, is power over Ethernet. But the same happened when we kind of move from the legacy devices, the hardwired devices, to the addressable devices. We kept the zone boards and stuff like that, so be able to communicate with those devices. Similar is going to happen to the 802s. That's my belief. I don't think there is many technical limitations into this. It will be more about how to get it done and liability or maintenance capabilities of all these manufacturers. There are some manufacturers that are not in business anymore. So how we maintain those legacy devices while we transition into the new power over Ethernet. So those things is going to happen, and just like we did now with, or in the past, with the legacy devices transitioning into the addressable devices. It's similar, use an analogy. So what are the codes and requirements that apply to these concepts? Where we need a building code. I did mention that before. I'm mentioning the NFPA 101. I know that I have many critics that say that that's not a building code, and I agree. It's not meant to be the building code, but for many people, this is a good reference instead of the NFPA 1, for example, which is the building code. But 101 is more organized, I don't know, at least from my perspective. But it could be your IBC, your state code, your national code, depending where you are in the world. That's another thing that I forgot to mention. The 802s are a global entity. All the working group members are from everywhere. So they tend to be very broad, and you can work on the same standard from Europe, Asia, the US, you name it. So more broadly available, more like a technology reference than a local requirement. When we get to the building codes, yes, we are more into like the state and federal requirements, or country or region regulations. So those building codes are going to tell you where do you need these fire alarm systems, and usually the installation code on how to do these or how to implement these are, for example, in this case, the NFPA 72 is our main reference, because that's very specific on how to install these systems. So those are some of the examples there. So again, repeating myself, I think NFPA 101 or your building code will tell you where do you need a mass notification, where do you need a firearm system, where does need to be audio. Not all the firearm systems require audio or speakers. And for most of them, they do reference, or most regulations that I know, even in New Jersey, they reference NFP, even the state building code, the fire code, they do mostly reference NFPA 72. So that's what I'm using here now. This is the newest version that I know. It helps you to establish how to install these devices, how far from the vents, how far from the end corridor, how to install these devices. So mainly it's an installation standard requirement here. And one of the main questions is, how are we addressing these changes? How the fire alarm code, in this case NFPA 72, kind of how it's addressing the upcoming technology of PoE, for example. So these are the main chapters. I'm not going to go into the detail to read all these, but at least you're going to have these references somewhere in the webinar. So chapter 12 have the description of the class N. It says a new requirement, but it has been there for a few editions already. It's just like the description or the definition of the class N has been changed a little bit just to stay tuned with the technology, I guess, or coordinated with other committees. But mainly that class N, keep it in mind, that class N wiring is the one that is going to allow you to use power over Ethernet in firearm systems. Again, you can also do a performance-based design and ask the authority in having jurisdiction for his blessing. And I think we did a project where a non-UL listed device was used. And then we asked for permission and it was granted after a few debates, but it's doable. And the more we train people, even the authority having jurisdiction, the inspectors, the plan examiners, and the more this technology is broadly used, the more access are we going to have to this type of technology, and the more open to accept this type of design. More chapters that will be, where you can find implications or connections to power over Ethernet, maintenance-wise. Here in chapter 21, it's where the revised terminology was. This is mainly for emergency control functions. So many other things that you can use this type of wiring that we're going to be connecting to our power over Ethernet. This is all the chapters that I saw in this new edition that are connected to this thing. If I missed something, please let me know. I think that I went chapter by chapter by chapter, so I try to do a thorough review of the new editions. But if I have missed something, just let me know. Also here, they mention here for the household firearm systems, chapter 29. And we're going to mention that one because, as I mentioned before, the UL requirements or certifications are up now. I've been told that the listing, there was a due date required by NFPA 72. I think it was NFPA 72 that it was required that all the devices will be under the new listing by this year. But I've been told that this was postponed for a year, I think. And this was before the coronavirus pandemic. So this was before all these medical issues that we are encountering now. So there was also a backlog in the UL doing the testing and all that. So there is more time now to get your devices listed for the new edition of the UL certificate. The smoke detectors are on the 7th edition, and the standalone devices are on the 8th edition already. So they are working on getting all the manufacturers or these products listed for the new edition of the UL, but they're working on it. And the intent is to reduce false alarming, especially for the cooking smoke, detecting different smoke characteristics. And I think this is going to open also for the new wave of testing. Hopefully, the following editions will include the PoE devices as well. So at this time, I haven't seen any PoE, power over Ethernet smoke detectors listed yet. So hopefully that will be in a new edition coming up. Well, let's see the example. Let me see how much on time. Perfect. So we are half an hour now. So this was the first example that I showed you already. And this one is an interconnection between switchboards, the Ethernet boards here, the icons in blue, if you can see that. And this is allowed by NFPA 72 at this time, right? I haven't seen it yet because I haven't seen the UL listing on these peripherals yet, but this is how the standard is accommodating when those devices come into place. So this one way here, using the class N. This one we have used it in the field many times already. I think that for some people they have done it intentionally, some others have done it because that was available to them, and they didn't know that it was PoE. It's just a concept now, but we have done it before where we have used these switches between the panels to connect different nodes or different buildings. This could be one building with 3 panels or fire alarm panels, or it could be 3 different buildings connected through an Ethernet cabling or infrastructure. So these are different applications of that. So we have done it before, mainly for communications or your network. When you say a style 7 communication wiring between the nodes, this is what it means. And then you can do it with wire, or you can do it with Ethernet cables now, or with fiber as well. So, and there are different parts that you're going to need for the panels, but the technology is out there. So this one, it's already out there. Mass notification, as many of you have probably worked on this mass notification, there were some cases where they I think it's for some military applications that the firearm system has to be separated from the mass notification system. I'm not sure if this is still the case. I haven't seen one of the specs recently, but that was the case many years ago for multiple years. So this is something where having a power over Ethernet, or at least the communications over Ethernet, will help you to reduce cost, and not only cost. This time is getting the infrastructure there, getting the wiring on the ground, mostly when you are dealing with different buildings or in a military compound or a correctional facility or a hospital. So that also helps. It's not only cost, but it's also being smart and doing the best thing that you can with the existing technology that we have. This one is one of the opportunities that I see. It's when you have multiple systems interconnected to each other, and you maybe even including the mass notification, the outdoors mass notification, that it can be connected to Wi-Fi as well. So again, this is one of the opportunities that I see. We have done many of these installations, but mainly with fiber and, let's see, using the existing network, but only for communication, like the network communication between panels, for example. And now I think we're gonna start seeing the next round of installations where we're gonna see that first example, this one, where the field devices are actually PoE devices. So that will be like the next step, and I think that's going to be the future. How far away from us? I don't know, a few years, I will say, because you need to get to the UL listings process to get those devices up. But I think it's coming. There is no way around that. And there is one more item that I want to mention it to you, is the IEEE standard development process. Because it wasn't on my initial presentation, but I just want to add it because I think this is my outreach presentation for you is please participate in developing these standards and any other standard that you use. These are not sitting on stone documents. These documents can only be better if we do provide feedback. And these are the main 4 standards on PoE that could be related to firearm systems. They have many more. Believe me, we have hundreds of 802s. But these are the ones that I think are, geared towards what we use here in firearm systems. So just go to the link and see how can you provide some feedback to this one, because they're going to develop these standards with or without our feedback. So they will develop this for other devices, not only for firearm systems. So, the more we provide our feedback, the more our concepts will be embedded into the technology. I mean, the technology, the new standards and the technology as well. So this is an open process. There are multiple ways of participating, and this is a general overview of how our standards are developed. If we don't review it in 10 years, they get archived. But that's mainly it. It's an open process. Our main intent is to build consensus documents, more based on technology requirements than regulations. It's not about laws or regional requirements, but more about the technical arguments that will be embedded into the systems to make it better. And how can we improve these technologies or these interconnections or correlation committees, for example, with the different SDOs, standard developing organizations. Like here, we only mentioned 2 standard developing organizations, but there are many more. ICC is another one, or IEC in Europe as well, or maybe they're also everywhere. But I'm just trying to make a point is the more we collaborate, the more these devices and this system will work together in the field. And as you may see it, we have been working in New York City, then China, then Latin America, then the Middle East. So Europe, there is no boundaries anymore for technology. And now with this, pandemic as well, we are all working from home now, and these things will evolve again. So the more we combine our efforts, I think the better prepared we'll be for future requirements. So these are our conclusion. I just want to touch base on some of these because these are the closing statements for our goals. So you get your CEUs. So again, please participate in this standard developing process. Send us your feedback. And that's the only way I think that we can make these documents better and these technologies better. With that, I give you the mic, or I'm going to see the comments from Luis. And if you have any other questions, feel free to send me an email.
Hey, Ernesto, thank you for that fantastic presentation. If you give me 1 second, I'm actually having a slight technical issue on my end, just being able to view the questions. So
okay.
This is me just vamping.
I need my coffee after that. Yeah.
Good. This will give you 1 second to go grab your coffee. Okay. Great. Okay, here we go now. So the first question we have is, fire alarm systems require backup power. Does the technology negatively affect the required backup power?
No, actually, some of the PoE servers and those boxes that I cannot draw there, and the system, they also have a UPS backup. I don't remember, I didn't went into the details on how many hours do they provide for backup, but that is something that we as a fire protection engineers could implement in one of the 802s. From my perspective, they in the future, there could be an 802.FA 101, let's say it. So one dedicated section to what the PoE requirements could be for firearm systems. And the backup will be one of them, because I think that's one of the main difference will be how many hours of backup do they provide for an Ethernet system than what we provide for firearm systems, which is 24 hours of backup plus 5 minutes an alarm for regular systems or non-audio, and 24 hours and 15 minutes on alarm for audio systems. And there are higher requirements too when you go to FM global requirements. So depending on our technical spec requirements, we could also implement that into the backup. But that's mainly like after the technology is done. You have the server and the systems and the connections, and then your backup is before that. So it's just a matter of implementing that requirement. But that's a very good question. I think that's where one of the main difference will be is in how many hours of backup are they providing at this time.
Gotcha, great. So the next question I have is in reference to one of the earlier diagrams, and I apologize, I don't know which one it was. With about 15 minutes into your presentation, not that that would help.
Okay. Let me check.
But it was in regard to the notification appliances and initiating devices on the same circuit. So the question is that allowed or possible with class N?
This one that I'm showing here is the one, I think it is, the one that you're mentioning, or the question you're in reference to, where you have initiating devices. Is this one a smoke detector? I don't know if I can click on it yet. No, sorry. Where you have initiating devices like the smoke detectors, it could be a pull station or anything, and you also have the notification appliance, which this one may be like a horn strobe type of thing. I don't think you can do audio from the same switch, but this is allowed by the NFPA 72 required code standard. So I don't think we have the field devices listed for that yet, but it is allowed. So when the time comes and we have cross-listed devices where you have initiating devices and notification listed for this use, then the answer is this allowed by code, NFPA 72 code? The answer is yes. But we don't, from my experience, we don't have these devices listed yet for this use. And that's why I haven't installed this in the field. We haven't designed anything like this yet, to my knowledge.
Okay, great. The next question we have is, well, what type of head-end graphics are used in the PoE-based fire alarm system?
I don't foresee any changes on the diagrams, or if you have, now there is even three-dimensional fire command centers. I don't think we're gonna make any changes on that. It's more about the field devices and how we power them. But the diagrams and the schematics, I don't foresee any major changes on that.
Great. The next question we have is the RS485 CAT cables the fire rated type?
Let me see. I gotta check on that one. My answer, if I remember from memory right now, I would say no. They may not be fire rated, but there are many ways that you can use this type of cabling for fire alarm systems. So if you enclose that cable, let me show you one of the other examples. Hold on. Let me see if I can move my screen to. Let me see if I can show you that in an example. It's, I think, a little bit easier. Like for example, this one. If those connections there, those wires there, are not fire rated, but you enclose that in a shaft that is 2-hour rated, then that's one of your configurations for existing systems already. So, and manufacturers may go now into design this type of cabling for a 2-hour fire rated cables. So, and that UL listing was removed a few years ago, maybe more than a few years now. And I don't know where they stand. They were not doing a UL listing for the 2-hour fire rated cables anymore, but more like trying to, the installers mainly, or the contractors, to provide a 2-hour enclosure around this type of cabling. So even if the cable is not 2-hour rated or 1-hour rated, then once you enclose it in a proper pathway, then that should be allowed. I don't know if I answered that question.
I believe you did. Thank you.
Okay.
The next question we have here is, does the technology use the same cables for data and power? And then if so, does it increase the probability of cable failure due to its dual function?
At this point, it's meant to do that. It's meant to do both power and data. And at this time, fire alarm systems are using this type of configuration that we are seeing here only to provide data. The failure on the cable, that will be more about the UL listing on it. And that is something that is susceptible to what the requirements will be when they are fully PoE, power and data on the same cable. But I don't think it's going to be a major issue. I mean, it could be it's one of the requirements. How big is an issue? It's more about the specific manufacturers to start testing those wires.
Great. The next question we have is how does cyber attacks on these systems how are they addressed? And then the follow-up question there is UL 2900-1 2017 rated software able to be used for cyber attack issues?
I'm not too familiar with that UL listing, but you send me a comment and I will look into it. There are a few other cybersecurity standards. You name it UL, but they could be other ones. IEEE has many of them. I don't remember all the categories. We manage 16 to 1700 standards. A lot of them are in IoT, are in security and cybersecurity. We also have a lot of implementations into the power grid. So there are many standards on how to protect the power grid, major substation, power station, underground, or anywhere, to protect that type of infrastructure from cyber attacks. So a similar concept could be applied to firearm systems. It's just to going from the mega projects to smaller projects as firearm systems. So I think we should do, we could do a technical review on those aspects, what the UL is requiring for cybersecurity, and there are many other ones, let's say the IEEE standards overall, and how can they work together, though, because that's one of the main risks. And that's not only for PoE, though. That's existing systems right now. The phone lines, or if you're using the radio signaling, that risk still exists today. You know, that is out there. So how we mitigate that is still a challenge, even if we don't do PoE.
Great. So a comment came in just noting that the NFPA 72 is planning to address cybersecurity in the 2022 edition, just as a comment.
That's great. And again, that's one of the ways of participating into these working groups. I do not participate in the working groups at NFPA or IEEE. I make that disclosure. I do like them. I have a passion for standards, but I tend not to work directly in the working group because I do this type of presentation, I do my analysis, but I try to send the feedback as well to my friends there, because these are engineers, regulators, code people, engineers, manufacturers working together to make those standards better. Now they see the challenge. Now it's cybersecurity is a big item. Making a failure or making one of these systems to fail could create major issues, safety issues in a facility. So it is a major concern now, and if we go to PoE, the same thing. I think the boundaries have to be there and the regulations have to be strict. And it's going to be evolving because the hackers, the new technologies are going to change and evolve. So we also have to prepare for that. And I'm glad to hear that 72 will address these or attempt to address these in the next edition. That's very important.
The next question we have is, how do we get PoE switches listed to a life safety standard so that they can be used in fire safety, life safety network with devices?
That will probably be a UL listing. So they will create the specs for the testing, and as they're listed now, they will cross-list it for fire, like any other equipment.
Okay. The next question we have is, could you give a general idea on what the power consumption levels of the various electronic devices or appliances are?
Perfect. I thought about that question, and one of the main or the easiest ways to do it, if you are already designing firearm systems, go to your battery calculations data sheet or your spreadsheet that does your calculations and see how much your current devices draw. I did a quick search online. As I mentioned before, the speakers, the amplifiers will be up to 50 watts. So that will be one range. Usually you have 2 main amplifiers and 1 backup. So each one of these, the connectors will address one of those amplifiers, let's put it that way, if you are going to up to 50 watts, for example. If you go to like initiating devices like this one here, they don't draw much. This one is in a standby is 86 milliamps, so that is not much. So you have to do your battery calculations to estimate that, but generally speaking, most of these panels will handle, I think it's 250 field devices. So it depends on that. The NAC panels are listed up to, I'm drawing blank. I think I try to do like 8 watts per NAC panel. So that will give you like a limitation on the NACs. What else do we have? Relays. Usually the fire alarm system will drive or monitor dry contact relays, so they don't draw much, but the motors and the other stuff are on the other side. But anyway, there is a draw from the relays, door holders also. So just check on the data sheets. If you Google this one, which is like a regular, you Google battery calculations in firearm systems, and you will find several outputs there. And that's how I will kind of design it. If you have your own calculations, then you know what your equipment is drawing.
Great. The next question we have here is, can the positive alarm sequence of a fire alarm system be done in a PoE fire alarm system?
I would say that the sequence of operation will have no impact into what type of power or how you provide the power to the devices. So your same sequence of operations will be implemented.
Great. So we're having one comment here on the effective date for the UL 217 and the UL 268. Just
Okay.
noting that it's been extended from May of this year to June 30th of 2021.
Perfect. That's what I heard before. I'm going to put a note on that slide at some point because I did hear that, and that's okay. You know, it had happened in the past. I think that these certification entities, name it UL or the other labs doing this certification, they want everybody to comply with this new edition, but they also have a backlog. Manufacturers are trying to provide their devices to be listed, so they you know, it's just limited resources everywhere. So I'm glad that they are also allocating more time for the big manufacturers, for the small manufacturers, for everyone to participate and get their devices listed. That's great.
Great. The next question we have is, can you use a Class N circuit to control the field devices, but then use an additional power circuit to provide power to devices that draw a greater power than that would exceed the PoE circuit?
My answer will be yes. And I think we have seen that in the wireless systems, where we have, for example, smoke detectors that they don't draw much. We saw this the data sheet of one of the manufacturers before. They don't draw a lot of power. So you do that one through PoE. That's an easy one. Pull stations, PoE. Water flows and tampers, the monitor points, PoE. So they don't draw much. But when you have notification appliances, for example, then you have your NAC panels or your amplifiers in the field that are wired. So because they do draw a lot of power. So it could be done. We have done it with the Wi-Fi, for example, in different locations in New York City as well, where field devices, initiating devices are all Wi-Fi. Let's say in this case, let's convert those to, or if you have an existing location, let's assume that those are PoE, for example. But then the notification was so rigid and so power consumed, there is so much power that can be consumed there, then the answer is yes, you're gonna have mixed systems where you're gonna have PoE and then for the initiating devices in general, and then a more rigid or more classic installation for the notification appliances.
Great. The next question we have is there a maximum network cable length for PoE-based fire alarm systems?
Can you repeat that, please?
Is there a maximum network cable length for PoE-based fire alarm systems?
I don't know. We will have to do not only the battery calculations, but your voltage drop calculations, like we do it now with the wires, the current existing wiring. You do voltage drops, and there is certain percentage allowed by the requirements. And even the devices will tell you the speaker will only work in certain margin of that voltage drop. So, and that voltage drop is significantly it's just affected by the length of that cable. So there will be some limitations, but if you have less power, you go further distances. So we will have to do the voltage drop calculations on that.
Great. The next question we have here is, would there be any different maintenance frequencies for PoE fire alarm systems?
If they have to perform with the current certificates or UL listings, the answer is they should be on the same pattern that is being used now. What is also open in NFPA 72 and I think others for the inspection and testing is that you can do statistical analysis to see how often you should do your testing. So there are two different ways: the prescriptive way, doing it as the table tells you to do it, and the performance-based design or the performance analysis, where it's going to do more statistical analysis to see if you can reduce it. Sometimes you can't. So, but just because there is a PoE device, I don't think that's going to be the major element for determining the frequency of the maintenance and inspections.
Great. And with that, I think we don't have any more questions at this time. So I want to thank you again, Ernesto, for a great presentation, and thank everyone for attending.
No, thank you, everyone. And if you have any more questions, my email was listed there at the end. So feel free to send me your feedback. And thank you, SFPE, for providing these type of platforms to be able to reach out to our communities.
Great. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.